The civilizations that fear peace the most are always the first to mistake celebration for war. When Imperial Deep Space Observatories detected an extraordinary surge across Earth's global communications, the Empire's strategic intelligence identified a disturbing pattern. Civilian transportation increased dramatically. Military aircraft rehearsed synchronized formations. Entire cities prepared for massive public gatherings visible from orbit. Every indicator matched historical records collected from civilizations that had entered large-scale wars. The Imperial Prediction Engine calculated a 93.6% probability that humanity was preparing for its greatest military mobilization. The Emperor refused to let a machine decide the fate of an emerging world. Rather than dispatching a battle fleet that could turn suspicion into conflict, he entrusted the mission to his heir. Princess Lysera would witness the truth herself before the Empire made a decision that could change two civilizations forever. The order was not welcomed by everyone. Grand Marshal Kaler argued that hesitation had destroyed empires before. He urged the Emperor to position the first fleet outside Earth's orbit before diplomacy could fail. The Emperor refused. "If humanity truly seeks peace," he said quietly, "our first shadow above their sky must not be a battleship." The first explosion painted the night sky in brilliant gold just as Princess Lysera's royal cruiser slipped through Earth's upper atmosphere. Her fingers tightened around the polished crystal railing overlooking the observation chamber, while thousands of synchronized bursts blossomed beneath the clouds like an endless chain of tactical detonations. Silent streams of emerald, sapphire, crimson, and silver climbed into the darkness before dissolving into shimmering galaxies of light. Every instinct drilled into her since childhood whispered the same conclusion. Humanity was mobilizing. Soft chimes echoed across the bridge as holographic symbols awakened one after another. A calm synthetic voice broke the silence. "Warning! Planet-wide energy signatures detected. Probability of coordinated military ceremony. 93.6%. Another window unfolded across the transparent display. Atmospheric launches synchronized across multiple population centers. Thermal output consistent with strategic signaling. Lysera did not answer immediately. She simply watched another wave of dazzling lights erupt above the coastline. Her world had celebrated victories only after campaigns had ended, and every military parade in Imperial history had begun with carefully coordinated displays visible from orbit. Nothing happened by accident. Nothing this magnificent was ever harmless. "Magnify the eastern continent," she ordered softly. The artificial intelligence obeyed. Cities stretched beneath the cruiser like constellations scattered across the surface of an ocean-blue world. Every skyline shimmered with movement. Rivers reflected ribbons of color, while countless streets pulsed with impossible life. Crowds gathered shoulder to shoulder without defensive barriers. Music rolled upward through the atmosphere in faint rhythmic waves that even the cruiser detected through advanced acoustic filters. Lysera's silver eyes narrowed. "No evacuation routes," she murmured. "No civilian shelters." The chief diplomatic advisor stepped beside her, his formal robes glowing beneath the pale bridge lights. "Your Highness, Earth officials insist tonight is their greatest annual celebration." She glanced toward him without moving her head. "Then why do their citizens assemble in such numbers before initiating orbital-scale signal launches?" The advisor hesitated. "Human customs are unconventional." Another brilliant bloom illuminated the clouds. The artificial intelligence spoke again. Additional observation. High concentrations of aircraft operating in ceremonial formations above major cities. Lysera folded her hands behind her back. Aircraft. Precision timing. Coordinated launches. Millions gathered beneath open skies. Every variable aligned with imperial doctrine preceding declarations of war. Yet one detail refused to fit. The faces filling the optical scanners showed excitement rather than fear. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders. Elderly couples sat together beneath folding chairs. Teenagers laughed while waving bright banners instead of emergency supplies. None of them behaved like people expecting conflict. Her thoughts lingered on that contradiction as the cruiser descended lower. The music grew clearer. Brass instruments echoed across the night, joined by distant cheers that rolled through the air like gentle thunder. Somewhere below, church bells answered the rhythm. Somewhere else, A marching band played with joyful precision. It sounded disciplined enough to belong to an army, yet warm enough to belong to a family. "Your Highness," the pilot announced, "we are approaching Washington, District of Columbia. Human diplomatic escort has arrived." Lysra turned toward the forward viewport. A single aircraft climbed gracefully to meet the royal cruiser, its navigation lights blinking calmly against the darkness. No weapons locked onto them. No interception pattern formed. Only a respectful escort flying steadily beneath exploding stars. For the first time since accepting the Emperor's mission, uncertainty replaced confidence. If humanity truly prepared for war, why did everything look so beautifully alive? The royal cruiser settled onto the illuminated landing platform with such effortless precision that even the waiting engineers paused to admire the silent elegance of its descent. Cool evening air drifted through the opening hatch, carrying the scent of fresh grass, warm pavement, and something unexpectedly sweet that Lysra could not identify. It was unlike the sterile atmosphere of imperial ports. This place smelled alive. Rows of diplomatic personnel stood waiting beneath soft white lights, but what immediately caught her attention was what they lacked. No heavy armor, no defensive barricades, no visible anti-air batteries. Her gaze swept across every rooftop surrounding the reception zone. Hidden sensors quietly mapped every structure within 3 miles. No concealed artillery detected, her tactical interface reported. Probability of ambush remains below 3%. That number should have comforted her. Instead, it only deepened the mystery. One man stepped forward from the welcoming delegation with measured confidence. He wore a dark navy suit instead of a military uniform, and the only emblem on his jacket was a small silver pin shaped like an eagle. His posture revealed discipline, but not intimidation. His expression carried the calm patience of someone accustomed to solving problems rather than creating them. Before introducing himself, he extended an official diplomatic credential issued jointly by the United States Department of State and the International First Contact Office. "Your Highness," he said with a respectful nod. "Welcome to Earth. My name is Cole Harrison. I have been assigned as your diplomatic liaison during your visit." His voice was steady and warm, lacking the rehearsed stiffness Lysra expected from official ceremonies. She studied him carefully. Approximately 6 feet 1 inch tall. Athletic build. No visible weapons. Small scar near his left wrist. Calm heartbeat. Direct eye contact without arrogance. Every observation suggested reliability, yet nothing suggested command authority. "You are responsible for my security?" she asked. "Partly," Cole answered with a faint smile. "Mostly I am here to make sure you enjoy your stay and understand who we are." Lysra remained silent for a moment before asking another question. "Why were you selected?" Cole glanced briefly toward the welcoming delegation before answering honestly. "Years ago, I served as a military engineer. Later I chose diplomacy because I realized preventing conflict matters more than preparing for it. When your visit was confirmed, my government decided you should meet someone who understands both military thinking and ordinary people." That answer unsettled her more than any display of force could have. "You believe understanding is sufficient protection?" Cole looked upward as another brilliant cascade of fireworks painted the sky with shimmering blue light. Most misunderstandings begin before people ask the first question. Lysra followed his gaze. Hundreds of glowing sparks floated downward like golden snow before disappearing above the monuments surrounding the Capitol. Nearby, children laughed as they pointed toward the sky. Couples stood arm in arm. Elderly. Veterans wearing neatly pressed jackets smiled quietly from folding chairs along the sidewalk. None of them looked toward the royal cruiser with fear. Most simply waved. Her translator paused briefly before interpreting a little girl's cheerful voice. "Look, Mommy. The space princess came to watch with us." Lysra blinked. The child sounded delighted rather than alarmed. On her homeworld, the arrival of foreign royalty would have emptied entire districts while security forces established layered exclusion zones. Here, families remained exactly where they were, eating, laughing, and sharing blankets beneath the stars. "They are not afraid that an unknown civilization has entered their capital?" she asked quietly. Cole considered the question before answering. "We spent months preparing for your visit. We hoped you would feel welcome before you ever felt guarded." The sentence lingered in her thoughts as music drifted through the evening air once again. Brass instruments blended with distant applause while another wave of brilliant colors reflected across the marble buildings. Her tactical computer continued searching for hidden military intent, but with every passing minute, the data became increasingly contradictory. Every algorithm insisted this gathering resembled the opening movement of a planetary campaign. Every human face insisted it was simply the happiest night of the year. The motorcade moved through the capital without urgency, gliding beneath towering trees wrapped in thousands of tiny white lights that shimmered like stars caught among the branches. Princess Lysera watched every reflection through the transparent window while her tactical display continued collecting impossible evidence. Population density exceeded every safety recommendation in the Imperial Security Codex. Streets remained open. Families crossed intersections freely. Vendors sold warm food only a few feet from government buildings. Even more astonishing, no armed patrols interrupted the celebration. Route analysis complete. Her artificial intelligence announced softly inside her earpiece. Risk assessment remains inconsistent with observed civilian behavior. Lysera almost answered aloud before stopping herself. The machine sounded as puzzled as she felt. The convoy slowed as it approached the National Mall. Countless people lined both sides of the broad avenue, waving small American flags while music echoed from a military band positioned near the memorials. Brass instruments filled the summer air with rich, confident notes that carried remarkable precision. The synchronized rhythm immediately reminded Lysera of ceremonial marches performed before imperial fleets departed for distant campaigns. Formation discipline confirmed, her tactical interface observed. Musical cadence suitable for organized troop movement. She studied the performers carefully. Every step matched perfectly. Every uniform appeared immaculate. Every command was executed without hesitation. Yet when one elderly musician briefly missed a beat, the others smiled instead of correcting him. A child near the front row clapped enthusiastically, and the old man laughed before continuing to play. No commanding officer reacted. No punishment followed. Cole noticed her expression. You look like you were trying to solve a puzzle. Your musicians perform with military precision. Many of them served in the military, he replied. Some still do. Lysera nodded slowly. Then this parade honors your armed forces before battle. Cole looked genuinely surprised. No, it honors service, sacrifice, and the people who came home. The answer created more questions than it resolved. Ahead, a long procession began moving down the avenue. Veterans rode in restored military vehicles polished until they reflected the fireworks overhead. Behind them came firefighters, teachers, volunteer organizations, marching students, community bands, and families carrying handmade banners decorated with children's drawings. There were no missiles, no armored divisions, no combat drones. The sequence made no strategic sense. Why place civilians between military units? Lysera asked quietly. Cole smiled, almost amused. Because they are not between them. They are beside them. Everyone here is part of the same story. A sudden roar rolled across the sky. Lysera looked upward instantly as for jet. Aircraft streaked overhead in perfect diamond formation, leaving brilliant trails of white smoke against the deep blue evening. Her tactical systems flashed amber. High-speed atmospheric craft detected. Coordinated flight pattern. Recommend defensive readiness. Her pulse quickened for only a moment before she noticed something extraordinary. Every person below stopped to cheer. Children pointed excitedly. Elderly couples applauded. Nobody ran for shelter. Nobody looked afraid. The aircraft climbed steeply together before separating gracefully into 4 different directions, painting enormous arcs above the Washington Monument as another wave of fireworks erupted beneath them. The crowd erupted into applause that felt less like admiration for power and more like gratitude shared among old friends. Lysera lowered her gaze toward Cole, who stood quietly watching the sky with the same peaceful smile worn by thousands around him. In that single moment, she realized the greatest mystery was not the aircraft, the parade, or the fireworks. It was how an entire civilization could surround symbols of strength with such unmistakable joy instead of fear. The parade gradually faded behind them as Cole guided Princess Lysera away from the crowded avenue and into quieter streets lined with historic brick buildings glowing beneath strands of warm white lights. The sounds of distant music softened into a gentle rhythm carried by the evening breeze, while the scent of fresh bread, roasted corn, and sweet cinnamon drifted from neighborhood cafes, whose doors remained wide open despite the thousands of visitors walking past. Lysra noticed another contradiction immediately. The closer they moved away from the government district, the fewer visible security measures she detected. Front porches displayed flags beside flower pots. Children chased one another across neatly trimmed lawns. Elderly neighbors waved from rocking chairs without interrupting their conversations. Every scene felt astonishingly ordinary. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere I think explains us better than any speech could," Cole replied. A few minutes later they stopped in front of a modest two-story house painted pale gray with blue shutters. The front yard was carefully maintained, although not perfectly. A garden hose rested beside blooming roses, a basketball leaned against the porch steps, and colorful pinwheels turned lazily in the evening breeze. Laughter floated through an open kitchen window. Lysra quietly scanned the property. No perimeter shields. No biometric gate. No armed personnel. "None," Cole answered. "This is my parents' house." Before she could respond, the front door swung open. A woman with silver beginning to appear in her brown hair stepped onto the porch, smiling with the effortless warmth Lysra had seen throughout the city. "Cole, you made it," she called before noticing the royal guest. Her smile somehow became even brighter. "Your Highness, welcome. I am Margaret Harrison. We are honored you came." A tall man carrying an apron dusted with flour appeared behind her, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel. "Dinner is almost ready," he said cheerfully. "I hope you like homemade pie." Lysra hesitated. Imperial etiquette required elaborate security inspections before any member of the royal family accepted private hospitality. Here, no one asked for identification beyond a polite greeting. No ceremonial announcement introduced her arrival. They simply invited her inside as though welcoming an old friend. The wooden floor creaked softly beneath her steps. Family photographs covered the hallway walls. Some showed birthdays. Others captured fishing trips, graduations, holidays, and smiling relatives embracing one another beneath changing seasons. One framed picture caught her attention. A much younger Cole stood beside his parents, all three laughing while struggling to hold an enormous pumpkin. "You display private family memories openly?" she asked. Margaret nodded with quiet pride. "That is what makes a house feel like home." Lysra slowly studied the photographs again. On her homeworld, royal residences displayed portraits celebrating achievements, victories, diplomatic milestones, and ancestral authority. Personal happiness rarely appeared in official spaces. Here, ordinary moments seemed worthy of preservation. A small golden retriever wandered into the hallway carrying a worn tennis ball. Without hesitation, the dog walked directly to Lysra, sat politely at her feet, and gently rested the ball against her polished boots before wagging its tail with complete trust. She looked down in genuine surprise. "He has never met me." Cole smiled. "His name is Bailey. He thinks everyone is a potential friend until proven otherwise." Lysra knelt carefully and picked up the faded tennis ball. Bailey's tail wagged even faster as she rolled it gently across the room. The dog bounded after it with joyful determination while laughter filled the house once again. For the first time since entering Earth's atmosphere, the tactical interface inside her mind fell completely silent. Unable to classify why the simplest display of trust unsettled her more deeply than every firework, aircraft, or military parade combined. The dining room glowed with the soft amber light of antique lamps, while the distant fireworks outside flickered through the windows like silent constellations rising beyond the trees. The wooden table was simple, polished by decades of family meals rather than royal craftsmen. Fresh bread rested beside bowls of vegetables, roasted chicken, homemade mashed potatoes, and a warm apple pie whose sweet aroma filled every corner of the house. Princess Lysra remained standing for a brief moment, quietly observing the arrangement. For chairs, for plates, no assigned seating by rank, no ceremonial distance between host and guest. Cole noticed her hesitation and gently pulled out a chair beside his own. "Around here," he said with an easy smile, "the guest gets the best seat." Margaret poured iced tea into crystal glasses while Robert placed another basket of warm rolls in the center of the table. Nobody waited for an official announcement. Nobody requested permission to begin speaking. Conversation flowed naturally, interrupted only by laughter drifting in from the front yard, where neighborhood children continued chasing glowing sparklers beneath the summer sky. Lysra folded her hands carefully. You invite a foreign royal into your private home during your largest national celebration. Does this not concern you? Robert looked genuinely puzzled. Concern us? She nodded. You possess limited information about my civilization. You cannot accurately predict my intentions. Robert exchanged a quick glance with his wife before smiling kindly. That is exactly why we invited you. Lysra tilted her head slightly. I do not understand. Margaret answered before anyone else could. People are harder to fear after you share a meal with them. The sentence lingered in the quiet room longer than anyone expected. Her translator confirmed every word twice, as though the software itself struggled to accept the simplicity of the idea. Cole broke a piece of bread and placed butter across its warm surface. We have learned that conversations usually begin better at a dinner table than across a negotiation table. Lysra studied him for several silent seconds. On my world, diplomatic meals occur only after trust has already been established. Cole smiled gently. On ours, they are often how trust begins. Bailey wandered beneath the table, resting his head against Lysra's chair before sighing contentedly. She absent-mindedly stroked the dog's soft fur while considering everything she had witnessed since arriving on Earth. Her tactical education insisted that trust must always follow certainty. Yet every human she had met behaved as though trust itself created certainty. Outside, another burst of fireworks illuminated the dining room windows with brilliant blue light. Lysra instinctively looked toward the sky. May I ask something honestly? She said. Of course, Cole replied. Earlier today, I believed your people were preparing for war. Even now, I still struggle to understand why millions gather beneath aircraft, fireworks, and military music without fear. Why bring children into such an environment? The room grew peacefully quiet. Robert set down his fork before answering. Because they deserve to remember what peace looks like. Margaret nodded softly. The celebration is not teaching them how to fight. It is teaching them why peace is worth protecting. Cole looked toward the glowing window where children laughed beneath another shower of golden light. If the next generation only remembers conflict, then conflict becomes normal. We would rather they remember evenings like this. Lysra slowly turned toward the family photographs lining the nearby wall. Birthdays, graduations, holidays, ordinary moments preserved with extraordinary care. For the first time since leaving her homeworld, she wondered whether the strongest civilizations measured greatness not by the wars they could win, but by the peaceful memories they refused to lose. When dinner ended, the last slices of warm apple pie disappeared beneath quiet conversation instead of formal speeches. Margaret gathered the empty plates despite Lysra's polite offer to help, insisting that guests never cleaned up on their first visit. The simple sentence felt strangely powerful. On her homeworld, every interaction between royalty and civilians followed centuries of carefully preserved etiquette. Here, kindness seemed to require no ceremony at all. Cole stepped onto the front porch and waited as Lysra joined him. The evening air had cooled slightly, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass mixed with distant fireworks drifting across the horizon. The neighborhood remained alive with laughter. Children pedaled bicycles decorated with tiny flags while neighbors carried folding chairs onto their lawns to watch the sky together. Nobody hurried home. Nobody watched the streets with suspicion. Every house glowed with welcoming porch lights instead of defensive security beacons. There is somewhere I would like to show you, Cole said quietly. Lysra followed without hesitation. They walked several blocks until the cheerful sounds of celebration slowly faded behind them. The sidewalks became quieter. Towering oak trees cast long shadows beneath gentle streetlights. Ahead, white marble columns emerged from the darkness, illuminated by soft golden lights that reflected across still water. The Lincoln Memorial stood in solemn silence while visitors moved respectfully across the broad stone steps. No music played here. No fireworks interrupted the peaceful atmosphere. Families spoke in whispers as though entering a sacred place. Cole stopped near the reflecting pool. This is where many people come when they want to remember who we are supposed to be. Lysra slowly surveyed the monument. Her tactical systems detected no defensive infrastructure despite the historical importance of the location. Instead, They recorded elevated emotional responses among the visitors, increased heart rates, quiet voices, tears in several individuals. Yet no visible threat existed. "Why bring me here during a celebration?" she asked softly. Cole looked toward the distant lights shimmering across the water. "Because the celebration only tells half of the story." They continued walking until they reached another memorial where polished black stone stretched across the landscape like a perfectly still river. Thousands upon thousands of names covered its surface. Visitors gently traced engraved letters with their fingertips while leaving flowers, handwritten notes, and small American flags at the base of the wall. A young boy stood beside his grandfather, asking quiet questions that the older man answered with patient kindness. Lysra watched them for several moments before speaking. "These are soldiers." "Some were soldiers," Cole answered. "Some were pilots, medics, engineers, and ordinary people who answered extraordinary moments." Lysra reached toward the cool stone without touching it. Endless names reflected faintly beside her own image. "Your celebration began with aircraft, marching bands, and fireworks. I believe they honored military strength." Cole shook his head gently. "They honor memory." She looked at him with genuine confusion. "Memory. Strength fades. Weapons become obsolete. Victories eventually become history. But remembering the cost of peace helps people avoid forgetting why it matters." The words settled quietly between them while a breeze carried distant echoes of another fireworks display across the city. This time the sound no longer resembled preparations for battle. It sounded like an enormous family refusing to let gratitude disappear. Lysra's internal tactical computer quietly updated its assessment for the first time since arriving on Earth. Previous threat evaluation no longer supported by available evidence. Human. Behavioral patterns inconsistent with pre-conflict mobilization. Alternative conclusion recommended. She silently dismissed the notification. She no longer needed an artificial intelligence to tell her something extraordinary was unfolding. As her reflection merged with thousands of engraved names beneath the evening lights, Princess Lysra began to understand that humanity did not celebrate because it loved war. Humanity celebrated because it remembered exactly why peace was worth protecting. They remained beside the memorial until the last traces of twilight disappeared beyond the horizon. Then, almost as if the entire city had agreed upon a single silent signal, people began walking back toward the National Mall. Families folded their lawn chairs. Veterans adjusted old service caps with quiet dignity. Children held glowing bracelets while clutching the hands of parents and grandparents. Princess Lysra noticed that no one rushed. Thousands moved together with remarkable patience, creating an effortless order that required no commands. Cole walked beside her without speaking. Some moments, he understood, deserved silence more than explanation. As they approached the broad lawn once again, the crowd gradually came to a stop. Tens of thousands of people faced the same direction beneath the warm summer sky. The Washington Monument rose like a pale pillar against the darkness, while distant fireworks paused for the first time all evening. An unexpected stillness settled across the Capitol. Lysra instinctively looked toward the surrounding rooftops. No defensive alerts appeared. No military formations emerged. Even her tactical systems detected nothing except elevated emotional responses spreading through the crowd. "Why has everyone stopped?" she whispered. Cole answered just as quietly. "Because this is the moment we remember together." A lone trumpet began to play somewhere beyond the sea of people. The melody drifted across the open lawn with remarkable clarity, gentle enough to feel almost fragile. One by one, conversations faded completely. Even the youngest children grew unexpectedly quiet, watching the adults around them with curious respect. Lysra slowly turned in every direction. She had witnessed imperial ceremonies attended by millions, yet never had she experienced silence carrying such extraordinary weight. On her world, silence belonged to fear, discipline, or mourning ordered by the throne. Here, it belonged to choice. Nobody demanded it. Everyone offered it willingly. As the final note disappeared into the night, another sound rose in its place. Voices, thousands of them. Men, women, children, elderly veterans, visitors from distant states, and strangers standing shoulder to shoulder began singing together. There was no professional choir leading them. No amplification directing perfect harmony. Some voices were strong. Others cracked with age. A little girl near the front struggled to remember every word while her grandfather smiled and quietly helped her continue. The imperfections somehow made the moment even more beautiful. Lysra listened carefully. Her translator rendered every line with flawless accuracy, yet it could not fully explain what she felt. These people were not singing about conquest. They were not promising vengeance against enemies. They were expressing gratitude for a country that remained imperfect, but endlessly worth improving. She glanced toward Cole. His eyes never left the flag, gently moving in the evening breeze. "You all know these words?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Most of us grew up singing them. Even after everything your history has endured." Cole smiled faintly. "Especially after everything our history has endured." Tears quietly appeared in the eyes of several veterans standing nearby. One elderly woman rested her hand against a weathered photograph while continuing to sing with quiet pride. Nobody looked ashamed of remembering. Nobody appeared eager to glorify suffering. They simply refused to let sacrifice disappear into silence. Inside Lysra's mind, decades of imperial education began unraveling with astonishing speed. Every lesson had taught that unity was achieved through power. Yet before her stood a civilization proving that memory could unite people just as deeply as victory. As the final verse faded into the warm summer night, and another brilliant firework blossomed above the monument, Princess Lysra realized she had made the greatest mistake of her diplomatic career. She had mistaken the language of gratitude for the language of war because she had come from a civilization that had forgotten the difference. Long after the final chorus faded, the people did not rush away. They lingered beneath the stars, exchanging quiet smiles with strangers as though every familiar face and every unfamiliar one belonged to the same extended family for a single evening. Princess Lysra stood motionless, watching children wave tiny flags while grandparents folded blankets with practiced hands. There was no triumph in the air. There was only gratitude. The realization settled deeper than any diplomatic briefing she had ever studied. As they walked toward the waiting diplomatic vehicle, the city lights reflected across the polished pavement, still damp from the evening humidity. Fireworks continued blooming above the skyline. Yet now every brilliant color carried an entirely different meaning. They no longer resembled tactical signals or coordinated military commands. They resembled memories rising into the sky, bright enough for every generation to see before quietly fading into darkness. Cole noticed the thoughtful silence beside him. "You have been quiet for a while," he said gently. Lysra nodded without looking away from the horizon. "I have been correcting years of certainty." They stopped beside the reflecting pool where the final bursts of gold shimmered across the calm water. For several seconds neither of them spoke. The breeze carried distant laughter mixed with the faint sound of church bells somewhere beyond the monuments. "May I tell you something I have never admitted outside the Imperial Council?" she finally asked. Cole leaned lightly against the stone railing. "You can tell me." Lysra drew a slow breath. "On my world, every gathering of this size has only one purpose. It announces power. Entire cities assemble before military campaigns. Music is written to strengthen resolve. Aircraft fly overhead to remind citizens of the Empire's reach. Fire fills the sky only when authority wishes to be seen." She lowered her eyes toward the water. "I arrived believing your civilization followed the same pattern. I believed your celebration was the opening movement of a planetary war." Cole remained silent, allowing her words to continue. "Instead, I found children laughing beneath aircraft they do not fear. Families inviting strangers into their homes. Veterans honored not because they fought, but because they returned. Memorials visited not to glorify victory, but to remember sacrifice. I prepared myself to study your weapons." She smiled faintly, almost embarrassed. "I should have studied your people." Cole's expression softened. "That is an easy mistake when you come from somewhere that teaches strength differently." Lysra slowly shook her head. "No, it is a dangerous mistake. We have spent generations believing peace survives because powerful civilizations threaten one another. Tonight I witnessed another possibility." She looked toward the thousands of families still celebrating beneath the glowing sky. "Perhaps peace survives because ordinary people keep teaching their children why it matters." Her wrist communicator emitted a gentle tone. An encrypted message from the Imperial flagship appeared before her. requesting the preliminary diplomatic assessment before dawn. Protocol required an immediate strategic classification of Earth. The default recommendation generated by the onboard intelligence still labeled humanity as an unpredictable military civilization requiring elevated observation. Lysera stared at the waiting report for a long moment before calmly opening the evaluation herself. One by one, she erased every automated conclusion. She deleted every threat projection. She removed every assumption built upon fear. Then, beneath the heading marked Initial Cultural Assessment, she began typing with her own hands instead of allowing the artificial intelligence to complete the report. Cole watched quietly without asking what she had written. He only noticed that when Princess Lysera finally pressed the transmission key, the guarded caution that had filled her eyes since arriving on Earth had been replaced by something far rarer. It was not certainty. It was respect. The royal cruiser departed Earth just before sunrise, rising silently above a continent still glowing with the last traces of celebration. Princess Lysera stood alone inside the observation chamber where her journey had begun less than 24 hours earlier. The same oceans reflected the morning light. The same cities stretched toward the horizon. Yet nothing looked the same anymore. The display before her projected the completed diplomatic report awaiting final authorization. Imperial protocol required a single classification that would determine how the Empire approached an emerging civilization for generations. Hostile, neutral, strategic rival, military concern. Every previous analysis prepared by the artificial intelligence recommended heightened surveillance, expanded defensive fleets, and long-term containment planning. Lysera calmly deleted every recommendation. Then she opened a blank page and began writing her own conclusion. Initial assumptions proved fundamentally incorrect. Earth's largest public gathering was not preparation for war. It was preparation for remembrance. Humanity demonstrates an uncommon cultural principle. They publicly celebrate peace by honoring those who sacrificed to preserve it. Their military symbols exist beside families, children, teachers, musicians, and neighbors rather than above them. Their greatest strategic strength is not superior technology. It is the ability to transform memory into compassion across generations. Recommendation: pursue permanent cultural alliance before military negotiations. Humanity should be studied not for how they fight, but for why they choose peace whenever they can. She read every sentence once more before pressing transmit. The encrypted message crossed the void between ships in less than 2 seconds. Silence followed. Then another message appeared almost immediately. Priority summons. Imperial Council Chamber. Lysera entered the holographic conference surrounded by towering projections of the Empire's highest leaders. Faces that rarely displayed emotion now regarded her with unmistakable surprise. The Grand Chancellor spoke first. Princess Lysera, your report contradicts every predictive model developed over the past 40 years. Explain. She remembered the fireworks reflected in the eyes of laughing children. She remembered Margaret placing another warm roll on her plate without asking who deserved it more. She remembered thousands of strangers singing together beneath a peaceful sky. Finally, she answered with complete certainty. Because every model assumed that strength always announces war. Humanity taught me that true strength sometimes announces gratitude instead. The chamber fell completely silent. No one interrupted her. No one challenged her conclusion. After several long moments, the Grand Chancellor slowly closed the report before him. Then the Empire shall follow your recommendation. Within days, the first decision was announced across the Empire. The fleet originally scheduled to establish a permanent defensive perimeter around Earth would instead become the first cultural exchange mission in Imperial history. Military escorts were reduced. Scientists, artists, historians, teachers, and students filled the passenger lists. Earth would receive guests instead of observers. Months later, Cole Harrison stood once again on the National Mall as another Independence Day celebration filled the evening sky. This time, one familiar royal cruiser descended through the clouds without triggering a single defensive concern. Princess Lysera stepped onto the same grass where she had once mistaken fireworks for the opening shots of a war. Children recognized her immediately and ran forward waving tiny flags while Bailey happily pulled against his leash, racing toward his old friend. She laughed before kneeling to greet him, no longer as a cautious visitor, but as someone returning to a place that had quietly changed her forever. Above them, thousands of golden lights blossomed across the sky exactly as they had on the night of her arrival. The difference was no longer in the fireworks. The difference was in the woman watching them. Once, she had looked at those lights and seen the beginning of a war. Now she looked at the very same sky and saw millions of people choosing, together, to remember peace. And somewhere far beyond Earth, an entire alien civilization had begun learning to celebrate for the very same reason.